Ladies and gentlemen, this is Internet Personality Evangelist with another toy on loan from the Chosen Prime. This guy's pre-production enough to not have packaging and have just a touch of test shot jank, but I think he's real enough to take a look at. This is the second of Generation Toys Gravity Builders, the mad blending mixmaster known as Mixing Truck. Yeah, if I were him, I'd be pretty mad about being named Mixing Truck right after a slightly clever moniker like Scraper got dropped on the guy who came out before I did, but yo, look at Mixing Truck, he's sucking it up like a soldier and taking it on the chin. Good on you, fella. Anyway, can you guess what Mixing Truck's alt mode is? Can you? Can I stretch this stupid dumb bit out for a whole 60 seconds? No, I can't. Mixing Truck's Mixing Truck mode is anything but stretched out. In fact, it's kind of wide and flat up front. There's a lot of deep etched surface sculpting on the cab with lots of major details picked out in metallics and the same smoky translucent window parts we saw on Scraper. Mixing Truck has a little more color variance than his payloader companion in vehicle mode, and uses a lot of plastic colors to get those across instead of large patches of paint. Also, the tires are rubberized once again, but not nearly as thick as Scraper's. I still don't know how these will hold up in the years plus long term, but they feel alright on this copy of the toy. A neat little inclusion is an opening hatch up above the main mixing drum. A crazy little inclusion is the mixing drum's ability to split open and deploy a small cannon. It's always interesting to me to see how various different companies cope with this big old tumbler sitting here. Usually it's robot mode stuff, but this time we got some vehicle mode action too. Mixing Truck transforms about as complicated as Scraper did, but with most of the action focused down around his legs. And while it's not insane to go through, I found this was a bit less intuitive than Scraper's overall process. Tons of stuff still moves, but there's less of a sense of solid parts locking across the board. Like, there are still tabs and pegs, but there's also a lot of jostle room in the end result. On the bright side, the conversion still takes place in nice big chunks of separated limb activity. Once the legs are out of the way, the rest of the process is pretty darn straightforward, only being a challenge if some of the locking pegs don't want to play ball right away with your tugs and pulls. So show them who the alpha is, ladies and gentlemen. Bring the rain! Left cheek, left cheek! Are we done transforming this toy yet? Good, alright, robot mode! And yo, we have arrived at a terribly obvious Mixmaster. He's got the same strong proportions and puffy beef that Scraper first presented to us, but with the added bulk of all the extra armor mass around his head and shoulders. While it's in character with the source material, the huge shoulder plates are perhaps a bit much, and I wouldn't have been against some kind of crossways fold to hug them tighter around the shoulder blocks. On the bright side, you can extend the little nipples of his launcher hat, so go for Hedial nipple power. Mixing Truck has got a very similar face sculpt to Scraper, giving him another V-motifed visor and faceplate in a slight reference to the G1 Mixmaster toy. He's also able to light pipe pretty well considering the circumstances of all that mush around his head, but if you want more cranial freedom, check this out. The mixing drum can transform in a couple of ways from Mixing Truck's robot mode, as it can split and reform about an inch away from his back if you want some extra wiggle room for everything. Or you can split it and deploy the cannon inside as a sort of jetpack, which in turn gives the launcher hat enough room to hinge back and out of the way. You can also swivel the launcher from side to side. Basically, you've got options. But you've only got one firearm, and aside from an extending barrel, it works just like Scraper's. And man, this pre-production copy of Mixing Truck is terrible at holding it. Given how the far more finished Scraper was only marginally better at doing so, I really hope that this is all worked out by the time the toy is out there and for sale. Even though it's surrounded by all this mush, Mixing Truck still has a pretty good ball-jointed head. It can look around, it can tilt a little bit, can nod a little bit, and if you really want to get some better access, you can just, like, I don't know, move his hat out of the way, and you can get some real roll going on. I'm happy about that, because I mean, I've also shown you can fold this thing back, etc., but to have access to an inset head like that in a way that isn't utterly frustrating is something that pleases me. Now, this guy has some real test shot jank, and I'll just show you what the main thing is with that. This thing comes off super easy. It's supposed to come off, but it has a real habit of flying off when knocked at the most inopportune moments. So just bear that in mind. Also bear in mind that the real toy probably won't do this when you move the shoulder. That's unfortunate. There is an outward hinge as well. None of this is ratcheted, it's all friction. And there is an elbow joint. Also on this test shot guy, this likes to come undone. My assumption is that will tab in way more solidly on the real one. But he does just have a regular elbow hinge. He's got a wrist swivel, bicep swivel, He's got a knuckle joint, and his fingers are a bit thicker than Scraper's, and I think they look just a little bit better when they're open. They don't look quite as weedy and claw-like when they're too open. Now, there is a ratchet joint, and this is weird. This thing ratchets up and down and moves outwards like this, and I can't fathom why. I haven't had this be a necessity for any given mode. The only thing I've thought about is maybe, number one, your taste. You might want to have these, up or even like rotated up this way so they're less in the way of his arms. But if you want, you can also have him like move his arm forward, move that down, and it looks like the shoulder plate thing is like, hanging down and held down by gravity as he's moving his arm around, making that horrible noise. My God. So it's weird, because there's even like, there's a detented joint in here, and I don't really understand why. He also has a waist swivel, which gets in the way of the mixing drum pretty easy, so this is one of those cases where it would make sense to fold the mixing drum outwards some, or have it, just splayed open with the thing sticking out. But there is a waist joint. It's big and smooth, and the combiner ankle joint can be used here with no issue. Let me close this up. Let's jetpack this. Let's switch up our style a little bit. Yeah, the combiner ankle thing allows him to rock around a little bit here, and it's kind of cool. It looks natural. It's not too overblown or weird looking. His hips have got a very, very soft, buttery ratchet, and have about this range of motion. The skirt doesn't get out of the way at all, but I think that's still pretty good for the kickability of a guy this bulky. And you can, of course, lean him back a little bit if you really want to give someone a boot to the face. He's got a thigh swivel. His little weird flap things can ambulate around as well if you want them to for some reason. His knees are double jointed, but the way they work, it's not like they're really double jointed to a huge degree. Like, this looks kind of like a tight curled, I guess, like 100-degree knee bend, but the double jointing's from the transformation, and also means you can adjust where the legs sit in the weird kind of angled truck boot he's wearing. So that end of it is pretty helpful. And his feet are on ball socket connections and hinge connections, again from the transformation. This means they can tilt, but they can also move forward and backward a bit. The tilt is not enormous right away, but if you start moving them outwards and sideways, they tilt even more. And whatever your tilting wishes may be, the big like platforms here that rotate out to give him a fairly massive heel support allow him to maintain most of those poses without too much issue. So, a lot like Scraper, this guy isn't super posable, but he's quite adequately posable for something this bulky. I guess doubly so for something this bulky. But, yeah, he's not going to do acrobatics. He's not going to be doing too much karate fighting. And if you want that out of your Mixmaster, be prepared for that if you like the way this guy looks. He just does what he do, and he do it pretty okay. I just maintain that this test shot version, I'm letting him get away with some stuff, but I hope that these things are not issues on the final release. In fact, this is actually holding up pretty well. I was going to say that was holding up a lot better than in my regular playtime, but that's what I get for giving something a compliment. My positive words are poison to robot toys around me. If we're going to go ambulatory, it's best to start off by turning Mixing Truck back into a mixing truck. Will there ever be a Mixmaster whose robot mode is closer to his leg mode than his vehicle mode? I don't know, but I just said mode 3 times in the same sentence. So yeah, this starts off with robot mode conversion steps, but only for a second. The hardest part of this transformation is figuring out how to kind of skin the outer layer of the truck cab off of the meat inside. And it is much easier to do that if you just split the thing in half to get at the long tabs within. The only other dedicated pieces of engineering for leg mode are the heel chunks, but they're also part of the sole justification for the removable launcher piece on Mixing Truck's launcher hat. It plugs into them and tabs into the gray stuff just above to form a definitive heel strut for the gravity builder, a heel which, I guess, can launch missiles. Anyway, this leg mode is fantastic. It's just as clean and defined as Scraper's, but even more so looks like a cement truck that's straight up bent and squashed down to bear the weight of the fully combined robot. It is a very satisfying shape. It's still got an ankle tilt, and the drum is purple. because that was a thing back in the Hercules days. They sold add-on parts. Entire add-on parts for a purple drum. Mixing Truck brings many of Scrapper's qualities to the table, from his unique and dynamic visual aesthetic to his beefy, sizable build and lovely limb mode. But even taking into account that this copy of the toy is fairly early in the semi-finalized test shot cycle, he is just not as solid a standalone package as Scraper. His robot mode is a little too busy, and several of his transformation ideas are a little too finicky. In the long run, he's also one member in a 6-member team, but I usually like Mixmasters the most, and I don't think this one ended up as well done as his other ambulatory counterpart. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelis, and these two Gravity builders are already on their way back to the Chosen Prime. Big thanks to Brandon for passing these my way. I can't guarantee that I'll be keeping up to date with the set as it comes out, but it was fun to see a new company's debut release come out swinging like this. Just make sure you guys stick the landing. Don't rush out the final members. We are in a state of the marketplace where I feel this needs to be shouted at the end of a video review.